Hey, everybody, and welcome to TDR. Really fast, I just want to reassure people because I know the conspiracy theories proliferate really fast in 2020. So two things. One, this was not some sort of subtle Blue Lives Matter thing or anything like that. Two, I'm not joining the Blue Man Group. But three, just in case, I was not touched by the Night King and converted into one of the whites. As much as I love Game of Thrones, that's not what's going on. But anyway, everything looks good. I look okay. Adrienne, as always, looks great. Adrienne, how's it going?
It's pretty good. It's glad that you're no longer blue.
I'm nobody's more glad than me. Anyway, we've got an awesome hour of news for you, but you know what else is coming up? We've got a couple of things to promo. So one is that friend of the show, Brett Ehrlich, who's going to be joining us on Thursday to do our last Garbage People of the year, is going to be participating in the year 2020, as he has for a number of years. This is going to be available Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time at ABC. A look back on memorable events that happened in 2020. I don't know what they're going to talk about because it was pretty much a nothing year. But anyway, you're going to have Brett's going to be there. Karamo's going to be there. That's going to be awesome. Corey Bush. I hear Katie Nolan is going to be a part of that. So a lot of like fun stuff, hopefully, to end the year with. So you can definitely look forward to that. I believe as well, maybe somebody in the Twitch chat can confirm, but another episode of Deep Dive with Jordan Ewell, I think is happening after our show. But if you're on Twitch, we're going to get someone to confirm or deny that in the chat for us in just a second. But those plugs aside, thank you everybody who's already watching and being with us during our little tech hiccups. If you haven't already, please hit the like button and share the stream so that people know we're live. And as we get into this news, we will respond to your comments and to other things that happen live in the chat, including Obi-Wan Kenobi gifting a bunch of Tier 1 subs. Thank you, Obi-Wan Kenobi, as always, for doing that. That said, why don't we jump into this? We've got an interesting development on the now months-long saga to get a little bit more aid to the American people. After all, they got $1,200 like a year ago. I don't know what they're complaining about at this point, but the bill was passed a couple of days ago, and Donald Trump actually signed it. But he said that he wants bigger direct payments to the American people. And so the $2,000 payment bill passed the House on Monday. So just yesterday after TDR, they voted on it. That's the Cash Act. 44 Republicans joined all but 2 Democrats in the bipartisan vote. Just a little note, Kurt Schrader and the outgoing Congressman Daniel Lipinski are the only 2 Democrats in the House who actually voted against the bigger direct payment checks. President Trump repeatedly called for the increase to $2,000 while delaying his signature on the COVID relief package. But to be fair, he was very busy with golf and all that. He did finally sign it on Sunday night, and he has tweeted as of this morning, still calling for those bigger $2,000 checks, which means that with him calling for it, the House voting for it, it is on to the Senate. And unfortunately, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has yet to address the timing of such a vote. There's a little bit of breaking news that hypothetically he wants to get it done around Thursday. But one thing that was designed to hopefully delay that was a move by Bernie Sanders, who planned to filibuster the Senate's veto override of the bipartisan defense bill unless the Senate holds a vote on the $2,000 stimulus payments included in the COVID relief bill, with Senator Sanders saying, the American people are desperate and the Senate has got to do its job before leaving town. It would be unconscionable, especially after the House did the right thing, for the Senate to simply leave Washington without voting on this. And he's right, but it would hardly be surprising considering how often the Senate under the leadership of Mitch McConnell has been willing to do absolutely nothing as people suffer and die and lose their jobs and businesses go under. We're not sure at this point how likely it is to work, the strategy. Mitch McConnell seems to think that he can break this within a day or two. But in theory, Bernie Sanders could hold off this vote on the veto override for several days, putting a lot of pressure on Mitch McConnell to hold a vote on the checks, especially because we're down to just like a week in those Georgia runoffs. Adrienne, there's a lot here. What do you think of it?
There is indeed a lot going on, especially with that moving piece kind of off to the side, Georgia. And it's interesting because we have now these Republican senators from Georgia who are in support of the $2,000. And I think this is their way of not having to necessarily deal with the issue while they finish their last week of campaigning to hopefully, win the election and do more insider trading. Mm-hmm. Anyways, but yeah, it's just unfortunate as we see Mitch McConnell doing everything in his power to keep us poor and to keep the class divide where it is and making sure that people suffer. I just don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess Mitch was reelected. He's not scared of anything for 6 years. I mean, 6 years has got to seem like a long way away, especially for a guy that old. I doubt he's really worried about any consequences. The only potential consequences that he needs to worry about are whether he's going to stay majority leader. And all of that is going to come down to what happens in Georgia. Notably, we've got both Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue saying that they support the $2,000 checks, which, you know, we can have a little bit of debate about whether they would be doing that if they weren't in a runoff. I think that's an interesting question. You also have Marco Rubio saying that he supports them. There was one other Republican senator who was complaining about a number of different parts of this bill to raise it to 2,000, but didn't rule it out. But as of right now, you need 12 Republicans to get past a potential Republican filibuster to stop those checks. So two interesting filibusters going on. One hypothetical, one with Bernie Sanders saying, I'm going to try to get you the money. In theory, the Republicans could have one of the modern filibusters where 40 senators get to block whatever they want without actually having to do a filibuster and pay the penalty for it. At this point, with both Perdue and Loeffler indicating that they support it and that it would be to their benefit to have this pass, they seem to be reading the tea leaves in Georgia and saying that this is something the people of Georgia would want. What do you think about the pressure on Mitch McConnell? How do you think he's going to end up coming down on this?
Well, you know, kind of as you already noted in terms of Mitch McConnell having those comfy 6 years now that he gets to continue to stay exactly where he is, that he doesn't care about that much. But I do think that this could, to some extent, possibly come back and bite him, in part because he really wants to get that defense bill moved. But to be able to get the vote, he's going to need to essentially get all his ducks in a row and act right. And if Sanders can truly execute this, then it can go a long way in terms of holding back that defense bill from getting the votes that it needs, which McConnell wants before the end of the year. So it should be interesting. But it still baffles me to the extent that McConnell is invested in making sure that we don't have the money we need, because $2,000 is still laughable. But the fact that we're being denied that for no reason, especially when we have essentially the end of year moratoriums coming up in terms of an end of those, no.
Yeah. As you noted, it's still not nearly as much as what a number of good progressives in the Senate and the House have pushed for. And at the same time, it was one of the two. I think it was Lipinski saying that couldn't support these $2,000 checks because we have to start to take the national debt seriously. And like, wow, yeah, we knew when Biden got elected that they were going to suddenly start to care about the deficit and the debt again. But wow, that's quick. Like, yeah, I think a lot of Americans right now are like, sure, I lost my job. You know, there's a good chance that I could be thrown out of my house. I could catch this fatal illness and die. But the national debt really, it has been calling for some attention. What an unserious thing to say at this point. But anyway, within a couple of days, we could know. It is interesting, though, that Donald Trump, that he is continuing to this day to push for it. Like, it was one thing when it was before he signed it or after he signed it. But now, like, every day is another series of phone calls that he and his team are having with Mitch McConnell about Mitch's strategy. Mitch clearly doesn't want to do this, or else he would have already done it. So for Trump to continue to push for it, knowing that if it doesn't get passed, it is going to hurt Perdue and Loeffler. Like, the Dem ads have got to be focusing heavily on this in Georgia right now. So it's interesting that Trump, always acting as an agent of chaos in this case, might be both pushing for something that could be good for the American people and could be really hurting the Republican effort in Georgia.
And something also that kind of makes me think with Perdue and Loeffler, and their decision to go ahead and back this $2,000, which is something that Trump wants and has been vocal about, if they are working their way on to stay on Trump's good side so they can get a pardon before he leaves office, because the fact is that those investigations can be reopened at any time. And that whole insider trading thing, come on, get out of here with that. You might have been protected under the Trump administration, but once that administration is gone, who knows what will happen to these people. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's more going on.
Okay, well, there is more going on in the news, and we're going to turn to that in just a second. But before we do, I did want to read a few comments and super chats from the audience, including this first one from Jay Fergie, who says, Skater Dragon here, and still bitter John called golf a dumb hobby. I didn't call it a dumb hobby. I just think it's really bizarre to do it like 4 times in one holiday weekend. That is too much of almost any hobby. Adrienne, what's your favorite hobby in the entire world?
Oh, wow. It's funny. Now it's become staying inside and being a recluse. It's been amazing this year. I absolutely love it. But otherwise, I missed going outside and just walking around and talking to random people. I like that. That was one of my hobbies.
You
Yeah.
walk around and talk to random people?
Totally meet random people on the street,
Oh,
and
man.
especially people who are unhoused, and just have conversations with them. Because
That's admirable.
learning how other people walk their walk and live this journey. Like, they've got nuggets of wisdom, amazing stories, and I miss that connection.
Wow. I mean, I share part of the hobby. I actually really do like the few times that, you'll have to like drop off your car somewhere and it needs to have work done on it. I'll walk home. Like, I like the opportunity to walk across the city, but the last thing I want is someone to come up and talk to me. So let's keep our city walks on opposite ends.
That sounds fair. I respect it.
Let's see. Zane says the rain is a great sign, but cold, depending on what part of the country. And we had a huge storm here in LA, at least by LA terms. Let's see. Nick JL says, just showing my support. I hope things get better soon for everyone. I hope so too. And there are people who are trying. BC Trumpet, the Produce Dragon, says, Ben Dixon said this morning on Clickbaity he likes you, John, and sees you guys hanging after all this is over. Oh, that's nice. Maybe we can all hang and play some board games. Let's see. Okay, so I've got a note in here. Breaking. McConnell blocks Democrats' initial attempt to approve 2K stimulus checks amid growing pressure on GOP leader to act. Yeah, so, but that's pretty much to the plan, at least from what Bernie Sanders seemed to be indicating. What he's going to throw up is procedural objections to effectively everything that happens for the next few days, which would require Mitch McConnell and possibly the rest of the Senate to be there to override at each step of the way. The idea is that if they don't have the vote, he's going to cause them to have to be in D.C. for the next few days when they'd much rather be in Georgia, unless something significant has changed. But at least in terms of the general procedural operation of the Senate, this is kind of according to plan, I think.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Rebecca Hinson says, hi, is it possible for you to briefly describe the videos you show either during or after videos? For the ones with little sound, it makes it hard for me to know what's going on, and I feel like I miss important stuff. That is a great point, and in particular for the podcast, that would be a good idea. I will try to keep that in mind. And for pictures, too. Let's see. Raja Harris says, yo, Adrienne, Melanin Dragon here. I love your locked look. And can't forget about the father of dragons, John. Thank you, Raja.
All right. Thank you. Nice. Much appreciated.
Over on Twitch, Obi-Wan Kenobi, again, thank you for gifting subs, as well as Progressive NCO. Tails, who gifted 10, thank you. VG Knight, who gifted 10. Thank you very much for that. Georgie Khan thought that I was briefly in another dimension. Yay. JBO loves Jordan's show. It's off the hook. Well, I believe there's another episode coming. I'm waiting to get confirmation on the Twitch chat, but I believe that it is coming. And Not Just Another Mother says, I talked to random people and it freaked out my husband when we first met. My hubby is like John and I'm best friends with everybody.
Yep.
If you can do it. If you can do it, more power to you.
Yeah.
Okay, now with that, why don't we jump into other news? You might remember not long ago, we talked about one of the updates on the Tyson and other food processing plants' ongoing saga when it comes to COVID. Now, that has been a very complicated story that has resulted in thousands of people getting sick, many people dying. One of the most individually horrible components of it, though, was when we found out not long ago that some of the managers at the Tyson Waterloo plant had actually had some sort of pool going, betting on how many of their own employees would end up getting COVID. Now, some of those managers have been fired, so that's good news. Although the idea that like Tyson executives would fire the particular managers when they were almost certainly following the guidelines of Tyson executives seems wrong fundamentally, but hey, that's American capitalism. Now, though, one of those managers that was fired is speaking out in support of the pool that they were running. So this is Don Merschbrock, a former night manager at the plant in Waterloo, said he was speaking in an attempt to show that the 7 fired supervisors are not the evil people that Tyson has portrayed. Quote, we really want to clear our names. We actually worked very hard and took care of our team members well. County officials said last May, so this is just as of May, that more than 1,000 workers tested positive for the virus, which hospitalized several and killed at least 6. They blasted Tyson for not initially providing workers adequate protective gear and for idling the plant only after the outbreak had ripped through the city. So they decided to keep it going as long as possible so they could make money off of like 20,000 hogs that they process every single day, while forcing their employees to stand without PPE, shoulder to shoulder on this line for as long as possible so they could make as much money as possible. Because what you want in a food processing plant during a pandemic is for a lot of people to be around a lot of food that's being shipped all over the country. So that's what they did. Now, managers conducting the office pool last spring, apparently within minutes following mass testing of the plant's roughly 2,800 workers. The office pool involved roughly $50 cash, which went to the winner who picked the correct percentage of workers testing positive for the virus, according to that manager, who again is telling us all of this in defense of himself. He added that those involved didn't believe the pool violated company policy and thought the plant's positivity rate would be lower than the community rate due to their mitigation efforts. Now, the community was very hard hit, in large part because the plant was very hard hit. But we have a little bit more from this. Adrienne, what do you think about this defense? The idea that that pool actually wasn't the immoral thing that it's been presented by the media as?
It's really unfortunate when you have people like this that are out here saying, we took good care of them. Number one, that's a very paternalistic, white saviorism kind of mindset. The vast majority of these people were brown or are brown. They were clearly taken advantage of and exploited. If you're willing to bet on whether someone came down with this potentially deadly virus and to create a pool on it, you can't tell me you care about those people in any form or fashion. That's sadistic and gross.
Yeah, I like trying to present it as we're doing it because we're like focusing on how low the rate is going to be and it's going to be a morale booster. Like, I don't know, like what if you found out that I had done that at TYT, like had taken bets on who would have gotten sick?
That would just seem extremely lowly and indicative of poor character. And the problem is we as a society have this kind of dichotomous mindset of good, bad. It has to be one or the other. When it's like, no, people who can be generally good people can do bad things easily. But to try to defend this behavior in any way, that's some gall. That's some real gall. And it does speak to the brokenness of the culture there. But what really gets me, though, is how Tyson didn't order this investigation that led to their termination until the public found out. So somebody had to file this lawsuit. And then Tyson hires former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder to do these investigations. And they never released the report. Of course not. But part of me is like, did you really need an investigation to figure out that this behavior is unacceptable and to have a lawyer tell you we recommend terminating them? Get out of here.
Yeah, and it seems weird to like, okay, so people found out, so we're going to do this investigation of these managers, and we do it, and oh my God, we found really bad stuff, so bad that we're going to fire these people in a way that those supervisors are now saying was without any explanation. So for that to make sense, what they found had to be really bad, right? But they don't want to show us anything of what they found, which me as a curious person, I have to assume that what you found is either worse than what we know about, or you found additional stuff from what we know about. In either case, you're not showing it to us, which seems really suspicious. And we're not inclined to give you a lot of goodwill, considering that, like, among all of the horrible things that have happened in this pandemic, from the point of view of private industry, I don't know if anyone has been more irresponsible than these food processing plants. So why would I give you the benefit of the doubt on these investigations that you're now hiding from me?
No, exactly. And the thing that also gets me is the fact that there are these wrongful death lawsuits out there now. And that's probably why they're not releasing this information. I'm sure the family members of these workers can probably get that information in discovery. But still, I'm sure they would probably want it to be sealed. And also, too, by virtue of hiring a law firm and having them do it, a lot of it gets protected under attorney-client privilege, which is what Tyson was looking for, so that they don't have to turn it over to opposing counsel, and so that they don't have to release it. And it just says, we're not looking for transparency here. We're just looking for someone to have come in, to check a box so we can say we followed rules. We investigated ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And in the meantime, we don't know for sure, but almost certainly lobbying hardcore for the immunity shield against any sort of and retroactive immunity shield, by the way, considering, I mean, the number of people that were getting sick and that were dying as of May, which now seems like a million years ago in the pandemic. We're still potentially about to experience even harder times. So you can only imagine. But finally, I wanted to give one more quote from Don Merschbrock, that former manager, who says, "It was a group of exhausted supervisors that had worked so hard and so smart to solve many unsolvable problems. It was simply something fun, kind of a morale boost for having put forth an incredible effort. There was never any malicious intent. It was never meant to disparage anyone." Okay. Your message is out there. Wow. Everybody gets to interpret it the way they want. I have a feeling how they're going to.
For real. And something I wrote about in my book, because even though my book is specifically largely about sexual harassment and that kind of bullying in the workplace, all the principles apply because they're all about power plays. So when it comes to violating your civil rights or mistreating you, people will do it out of boredom. And that's one of the factors that you want to look for in a work environment. Will there be a lot of time of people twiddling their thumbs or having opportunity to just do kind of what they want to do? And if so, those individuals who are in positions of power or who seek power will leverage that to treat you terribly. Yeah. That's just unfortunately how our behavior pattern works as human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. The only like, I guess, goodwill I would offer is to say, I have a feeling that the individual plant managers, as I alluded to earlier, are not the biggest villains in this. But you can be judged for the things you did and going along with it. Going along with company policies that you have reason to believe are going to get people sick or kill them is not acceptable. And someone mentioned in the Twitch chat a component of this I'd forgotten and haven't mentioned here, but we've previously talked about was they're talking constantly. Even this manager is talking about how responsible we were. We took these tremendous efforts. We were so smart. We worked so hard. They had a policy that offered a bonus. So there were various companies that had bonuses for people who were working during the initial stages of the pandemic. But the way it worked was you couldn't miss a day for a certain period of time, a certain period of weeks. If you missed one day, you didn't get any of the bonus, which seems tailor-made to get people experiencing symptoms of COVID to go to work anyway, because they don't want to miss that. Like, you should literally be incentivizing sick people to stay home, to not get other people sick, but you're doing the exact opposite. That's not hard work. That's not smart work. That's designed to maximize your profits, even if it results in a lot of dead people. Anyway, let's move on to our next story, and then we'll check in with the audience after that. The initial rollout of the vaccine is happening, but the numbers are not necessarily hitting some of the projected goals that we had heard about. And just recently, Dr. Fauci, he was on the news and he was asked about the fact that they're apparently not going to hit I think it was the Project Warp Speed goal of 20 million vaccine doses by December. And here is what Fauci had to say.
We certainly are not at the numbers that we wanted to be at the end of December. You heard talking about 40 million doses for 20 million people. I mean, even if you undercount, 2 million is an undercount. How much undercount could it be? So we are below where we want to be. General Perna has spoken about this. He's actually publicly, to his great credit, he's publicly apologized about some glitches that have gotten to this. I believe that as we get into January, we are going to see an increase in the momentum, which, Jim, I hope allows us to catch up to the projected pace that we had spoken about a month or two ago when we were talking about the planned rollout of the vaccinations.
Okay, so 2.1 million vaccine doses have been administered. Although remember, for a lot of those, you're going to have to do a second one, so it's not necessarily covering as many people as it might seem, which is quite a bit less than the 20 million doses that they had projected. But he does say in the extended clip that, you know, what we want to do is we want to get through, you know, the initial wave of people that most desperately need it. We want to get into that period where anybody can go to the store and get it that wants to. But by the way, he's not in charge of the role of the vaccine, so he's just an advisor who's commenting on it. But so far falling short, which is unfortunate. Thoughts, Adrienne?
Yeah, I think it's very unfortunate. I'm actually very surprised that we got this far, just because I really thought everything would be completely bumbled underneath Trump's administration. So I'm very shocked that we've made it this far, which is good. But I'm really glad that Fauci is, to some extent, spearheading this, or at least being the face out there when it comes to representation, getting information out regarding the vaccine. But yeah, this is actually, I think they're doing pretty well for what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess, look, if you had asked me, 6 months ago, would I have thought that 2 million doses would be administered before the end of the year? I would not have. So that's good. But we've already gotten a couple of updates that we talked about on the show of supply chain issues and things like that. And lurking behind any update about the vaccine is when I think about the fact that Biden is talking about possibly, invoking the Defense Production Act, the idea that they could do that now or could have done it in advance of the vaccine being, okayed by the FDA. Like, I have to wonder, what would the number look like if we had spent the last 6 months ramping up for this, getting facilities ready, getting regional distribution centers ready, and all of that? These are things that could have been done that they chose not to do, even as they bragged about their response month after month after month. And even if Biden gets in office, does it on day one, and then they start to ramp up, think about how many more doses could have been administered, how many more people will die that didn't need to. And that's a thing that every day Trump could do. It's not just a mistake he made in the past. It is a mistake, but he could do it today. He could do it tomorrow, and he's choosing not to. And when there's literally nothing the government could help in that's more important right now than making sure as many get vaccinated as possible, it is incredibly frustrating to know that there is that hypothetical world out there that we're just not going to see.
No, and something also in looking back over these last few months, how many people we had out there that were essentially trying to tear down Dr. Fauci and also the medical community. I was reading in that flashback thing, Elon Musk writing an article, I think for Politico, saying essentially that there are going to be 0 cases of COVID-19 come May. Things like that made it so much harder, it seemed, for us to use the right resources and to invest and to be a unified front, where the entire world seems to completely appreciate the seriousness of this moment, yet America's out here acting a fool. And it's embarrassing and it's unfortunate, but it makes me completely understand why the United States is a COVID-19 petri dish.
Yeah, I remember that Elon Musk comment. And it's I get that, he's not a doctor. He's not an expert on infectious disease, which is why I wouldn't have made the prediction in the first place. And I would perhaps have a little bit of humility about areas that I don't have personal expertise in. I guess the only good thing that came of this year was that he didn't get brought in to head up Operation Warp Speed or something like that. Anyway, with Donald Trump right now in the vaccine rollout, he's been getting a bunch of credit and requesting a lot more credit. So it did happen, and he was president while it happened. So I guess to some extent he deserves some credit there. But I also think that the goalposts are being moved quite a bit, and it's easy. It's very easy to forget the things that have happened earlier in this year because so much happens every week to drive the old news out of our brains. But we've just experienced now, as of today, 2.1 million people have received a COVID-19 vaccination, which is short of the goal that we were talking about with Dr. Fauci, that 20 million doses. But do you know how much more short of the goal it was that Donald Trump was bragging about in the run-up to the election? I want to show you this video, which is from September 16th, about the eventual rollout of the vaccine in 2020.
We're on track to deliver and distribute the vaccine in a very, very safe and effective manner. We think we can start sometime in October. So as soon as it is announced, we'll be able to start. That'll be from mid-October on. Maybe a little bit later than that, but we'll be all set. So as soon as it's given the go-ahead, they're doing trials, as you know, and as soon as it's given the go-ahead, we will get it out, defeat the virus. We've manufactured all of the necessary supplies so that as soon as the FDA approves the vaccine, and as you know, we're very close to that, we'll be able to distribute at least 100 million vaccine doses by the end of 2020, and a large number much sooner than that.
There you had Trump in the middle of September, just a couple of months ago, saying that, for one, the vaccine would be rolled out in October. So he was predicting that just a couple weeks after those comments, it would start to be delivered, and he was off by months. But also that by the end of the year, we would administer 100 million doses. So we've hit 2 million. To be fair, as of Monday, the U.S. government says it's delivered about 11.4 million doses. So it's delivered 10% of what he had promised we would get. We've administered 2%. 2% is fine with milk, not great with public health. He was so off. And not just I'm predicting what's going to happen in 10 years. He was predicting that the vaccine would be delivered weeks later. And so it's totally fine for him to say that, for some of these vaccines, but not others, they provided some funding under Operation Warp Speed, or that, in theory, he didn't bungle it so bad that we literally don't have a vaccine. But to claim that that it should be named after him, or that he should get some massive amount of credit when he was promising and getting applauded for amongst his base these claims of delivery that 1/3 of the U.S. population would be vaccinated within 6 weeks of the election, was so amazingly off that even now, the new chief advisor to Operation Warp Speed is saying we might have vaccinated 100 million by the end of the first quarter, months in the future. So anyway, I know it's easy to forget these sorts of bold claims that are made, especially in the run-up to a general election, but that is something that he made that claim multiple times, and it turned out to be 98% untrue.
And the thing is, he's never really been truthful, and he's also never been consistent other than lying. So, to even continue to listen to him is just, it belies logic. It's no good. And I cannot wait till he's gone. That's for sure. But I'm also just seeing that, I guess the government has revamped the dietary restrictions or the nutritional things. And of course, they didn't address avoiding sugar or reducing alcohol consumption. And it just continues to remind me how this administration does not care about our health, our future consequences in any way, that it just takes care of itself. That's it. Yep.
That reminds me, one of the things that, of all the regulations that were rolled back in the early, the first year of Trump, one of the ones that frustrated me the most that got very little coverage was, I believe it was Michelle Obama had pushed for nutritional labeling to include added sugars for the first time, to actually make clear the sugar content and all of that. And they'd made that change, and it was going to go into effect, and he reversed it once he became president. It was just such a petty pro-industry thing to do that obviously is going to do a lot of harm to people's health. Hopefully that's something that, again, you can put on the pile of things that Biden has to get to at some point.
Exactly.
Now, really fast, in addition to the vaccine information, I just wanted to give you the most updated numbers on how the pandemic is going as we enter into not just the holiday season, but what's going to be a very dark winter. As of yesterday, 162,000 cases were reported, over 121,000 hospitalizations, and nearly 1,500 deaths. Now, understand that the reporting is being massively affected by the holidays, and we don't know when that is going to be resolved. So in terms of the number of deaths, it's possible that that's what it actually was, but we don't know for sure. In terms of the hospitalizations, that is a very worrying sign going forward, because we know that a certain percentage of those people are not going to make it out of the hospitals. And so going forward, it's still going to be very scary. Now, that said, why don't we read a few comments before we turn to other news? Let's see. Wayne Sugahara sent in a super chat saying, apologies to Felicia. I got her B-Day shout out wrong. John, I totally get your hard work trying to read all this stuff on the live feed. John, you rock hard. Well, thank you, Wayne. Felicia, I now no longer have any confidence in when your birthday is, but whenever it is, happy birthday. It'll come around eventually. Let's see. Richard Rowe for Congress says, vote blue no matter hue, a reference to my skin at the beginning. Varden says, with 6 months unemployed, I wake up for your show and can't wait to see what uncomfortable face you make every time you have to say Dragon Daddy. If that helps, I'm glad to be uncomfortable for you, America.
Ooh, wow.
Anyway. Okay. May Money into Building says, hi, John and Adrienne. TDR is the only thing able to pull me out of the kitchen nightmares vortex I was pulled into. Good to see you, Dragon Squad. Thank you. Pia says, TYT member from Denmark. Good luck, America. And do a hell of a good job getting the Trump swamp drained and imprisoned in 2021. Maybe to some extent drained. I don't have a lot of faith in terms of the imprisoning. Oh, by the way, Adrienne, there was, I think it was it Michael Cohen said that one of the things about all these pardons that are being thrown around is that now, in theory, they could be pulled in and have to testify because they lose their ability to take the Fifth Amendment. Is that actually a thing?
That is a thing. So your Fifth Amendment right against incrimination, it's a right you have not to get yourself into trouble. But once you essentially get a pardon, or even maybe you have an indemnity deal from a prosecutor, then you don't have any fear of getting in trouble. And thus, there's no protection for that right there because it really doesn't exist. So, and I think that's in part why Flynn was not pardoned sooner, because he wanted to reduce the amount of time that possible, change of tune prosecutors could pull him in, because he doesn't have any kind of fear anymore. And that also kind of goes to the thought that this is why the pardons need to be kind of explicit. But there's so much uncertainty in the legal doctrine as it concerns pardons, presidential pardons, and how broad they truly are. And so it's just going to be interesting whether the next administration is actually going to do something about it, or whether Trump's going to try to self-pardon because the law isn't there.
The pardoning is just crazy. I can't believe it. And not just that you can do it, but that, you can just do it and then you just move on and do other stuff. You don't have to answer. It astounds me that we're able to do that. To your knowledge, I know this is really hard, especially on the spot, but have we had instances where presidents have pardoned individuals and then they've been brought in to testify with that, that protection removed?
Not to my knowledge that I can recall. There have been very broad pardons, things that are like amnesty. And there is, again, a lot of power with it, but no one's really checked it that much. There was some intel there with Nixon and Ford, and that only went to the district court, the lowest level. So we didn't really get an appellate, something we can hold steadfast to. So again, there's just not much case law out there. And a lot of it is dicta, which means that it's not the issue the court was addressing, and therefore it doesn't have persuasive value.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, entering uncharted waters should be fun. Ewan sent in a super chat saying, I discovered TDR and TYT early on in 2020. I'm 23, and your show gives me hope that things can get better in the future. Thanks for all you do. Also, is Quantum Dragon taken? Well, officially, you're going to have to check the list in the Discord. But thank you for your support, and I have no problem with it. Now, let's see. Over on Twitch, Void Queen says, I have a friend who lost her job because she refused to come into work after testing positive for COVID. They told her she could work as long as she didn't have symptoms.
Oh, Jesus. They're going to get us all killed. This push for capitalism. It's been a killer since day one. This is just heinous.
Imagine, no, you've got a fatal illness. I want you in work. I want you near our customers. I want you near our other employees. A lot of people go every day not getting the opportunity to do something truly evil. But in 2020, people really maximize the opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Crazy Hawaiian in PA says, mahalo for hanging in there through the tech difficulties. You guys are the best. Thank you very much. Civic Folly says, Mitch always looks like a kid who's been caught throwing a bag filled with rocks and kittens into a lake. That kid would have some shame, I think, and then grow up to become a serial killer.
Yep, that'd be it.
Fiddlin' Narrow says, if they buried the COVID victims in a special cemetery to honor their falling, like Arlington, that could bear his name. Victims of Trump Cemetery. Damn.
He'd probably put a hotel right next door to it, so you might want to avoid that.
Exactly. Okay, with that, let's turn to a little bit more news adjacent to the pandemic. A lot of fears going forward about what might happen with evictions and foreclosures after the year that we've experienced. And, federally, there was up until recently, prohibitions against eviction. Some states and localities have done the same thing, but a lot of those have faded away over the past few months, opening up the possibility that a wave of evictions could be following. There are certain areas where the fears of that are even higher, especially very densely populated cities. Thankfully, some states are doing the right thing. We do have a bill in New York to stop evictions. This bill would halt evictions and foreclosures for 60 days, which doesn't necessarily get you to the end of the problem, but in theory could be picked up again. And it allows tenants and mortgagors who have lost jobs or income due to the pandemic to submit financial hardship declarations that would halt those proceedings until May 1st. Governor Andrew Cuomo said Monday he would sign the legislation. The measure comes as the state grapples with what is likely to be billions of dollars in back rent owed by tenants financially hurt by the pandemic. The National Council of State Housing Agencies commissioned a report earlier this year estimating that New York could face a rent shortfall of as much as $3.4 billion by January. So one of the frustrations that I've had while, the evictions have been talked about, the eviction, moratoriums and things like that, is people seem to think, oh, you just need to set it off, like just stop it for a couple of months or whatever. But they don't seem to understand that if you couldn't afford to pay rent, it's not like the rent goes away. At the end, you're going to have to pay it off. And what do we expect people who've been out of work all year because of the pandemic to actually do? So this is again a temporary solution with a little bit of financial assistance tied to it. But nowhere in this bill are they talking about $3.4 billion in assistance to people who couldn't pay their rent.
Yeah. And the thing is we all know that this is going to have a sort of a chain reaction, because there are landlords who, like, for instance, me, I own property and I have tenants. But if those tenants couldn't pay, that would be pretty detrimental for me, and that would require some struggle on my behalf. And there are a number of landlords who are like me, but the vast majority of the landlords in New York City, or I guess the ones that the government actually cares about, are these large companies, and they have a considerable amount of money. Also, the thing I think it's so important to remember is that New York has been having a housing crisis for the last few decades. In the mid-90s through 2008, that mortgage crisis, real estate firms were buying up and seizing properties throughout New York, and they were increasing the rent astronomically. They increased it by nearly 400% for the 5 boroughs, leaving out Staten Island. And that's based on the mayor's management report and the comptroller's budget. So they've known in New York that they've had a housing shortage problem that's affordable for people, and also that these major companies have increased rents to the point where people cannot pay for them. So now you're in this situation where you have these landlords wanting to make sure that they're taken care of. Clearly, since they've been hiking rents, they've been taken care of for some time now. The government needs to do something to take care of the people.
No, I'm glad that someone is finally watching out for the Jared Kushners of the world. That's definitely a concern. We've been speculating a little bit about going forward, what might happen, and we do have at least a vague idea. Legislators say that the extended ban gives them time to create a more expansive rental assistance program and to distribute relief funds. An existing $100 million rent relief program was approved over the summer, but less than half of that money has been distributed thus far. New York will get additional rental assistance funds under the latest federal stimulus package. Hope so, and hope that it's more significant for the first, because if you are facing a $3.4 billion rent shortfall and you've given out $50 million so far, and you're really hoping to work hard and do a bit more, that is a disaster. And unless you take it seriously, the question is just going to be, when is that disaster? When is that disaster? May 2nd? Is it a month or two after that? And what happens? What are the ripple effects from potentially, someone could try to run the math on how many people could end up being evicted, but it is going to be very significant. That is not just a problem for some individuals. That is devastating to entire neighborhoods. And so we're going to have to see, this is a good step from New York. A lot of states aren't doing this. But going forward, the follow-up legislation is going to be at least as important to make sure that this isn't just, holding off the disaster until a little bit later. Yeah. Now, I did want to also let you know, New York also has approved, as of just recently, about a week ago, New York's Automatic Voter Registration Act of 2020, a bill that aims to increase civic engagement by streamlining and improving voter registration at multiple state agencies in New York. New York is by no means the first to do this. They join 18 other states plus the District of Columbia with a policy that makes automatic voter registration the default option, requiring people who are eligible to vote to opt out if they do not want to register instead of opting in. And here's a little bit of details about how it's going to work. Individuals who are eligible to vote will be automatically registered when they apply for services such as Medicaid, unemployment, and public housing. A single document that serves as an application for services offered by these respective agencies, and a voter registration application. And those agencies will transfer registration information electronically to election officials instead of using paper forms. So this is certainly good in terms of the overall registration. One of the big issues with New York for a long time has been the Democratic Party's registration requirements. But overall, having more states doing this is a good thing. It seems crazy that it has taken until 2020 to do this. And there have been versions of this bill that have been put forward for at least 5 years now. But finally, they're going to add to that growing list of states. Hopefully, at some point, we can get some sort of federal legislation to make sure that everyone has easy access to registration as just one less barrier to actually participating in democracy.
Yeah, and especially because we've seen so many other countries that do have high voter turnouts, because they automatically make it easy to remove that added barrier of, am I registered, am I not? And so it's just, for a country that really likes to toot its own horn in terms of democracy and being so patriotic and pro-democracy, you'd think they'd reduce the barriers for people to play a role in our democratic system, but that is not the case.
Yeah. They toot and tout. We're touting everything here in America.
Sure.
Totally. And like I said, some people have been trying to get it passed for the past few years, but Republicans have complained, saying that, like they do in every case where this or something similar makes it marginally easier to vote, that it's just designed to help out the Democrats. I mean, that is one of the saddest things that I can imagine. How you are telling on yourself so much that just more people voting, well, clearly that won't work for me. Who would ever vote for me? Like, what a sad thing to say. But the Republicans have been very consistent for a very long time that they are in favor of ever increasing obstacles to voting, making it as rare as possible. It is going to be on the Democrats to actually make that hurt the Republicans. If the American people haven't been raised to sort of naturally be suspicious of a party that doesn't want you to vote, then there needs to be at least someone who's pointing out that that's a bad thing, or suspicious, or inherently anti-democratic. And so I don't think that the Democrats have done a very good job of making clear how virulently opposed to democracy the Republican Party has increasingly become. But they need to pick it up. They need to. And the Republican Party eventually, hopefully, once they've maintained through voter suppression and things like that, the ability to continue to win some elections as a minority party. Eventually, hopefully, that will break and not be tenable, and they can flip over and decide, maybe we should do something to actually get people to want to vote for us. That would be an interesting time for America.
For real. Yeah, actually do something to earn our vote, maybe meet our needs, maybe prioritize us in some way. God forbid. Mm-hmm. No, the Republican Party is not here for that.
Crazy. Okay, let's move on to another story. We've got a police officer who apparently threatened to murder the mayor of Phoenix if the mayor of Phoenix defunded the police. But don't worry, he was just joking when he said it. So when Officer Stephen Poulos expressed his thoughts, the room went quiet, apparently. We're hearing as of AZ Central. Quote, "If the mayor defunds the police, I'm going to shoot her." This is Poulos' sergeant recalled hearing the officer say. The sergeant broke the silence saying, "You're not going to shoot the mayor." And Poulos doubled down. "That's a promise," he responded. Now, to be fair, let's be fair to this person who's joking about assassinating a political leader for marginally reducing the funding of the cops. Some officers remembered the threat differently. One officer said he remembered Poulos saying, "If they defund us, the first person on my list is the mayor," which is a little bit different. A third officer remembered Poulos saying, "If they defund the police, I'll go over the mayor's house and shoot it up." So, different versions of the same story. We don't know exactly which one is the thing that this cop said, but at the end of the day, they're all threats to assassinate a public figure. Adrienne, what do you think?
Yeah, see, and it's interesting too, because of course, when I read all the different accounts these officers, it really makes me realize how interesting it is how when they're in court and they seem to testify to all the same story, it's almost like they've planned in advance, and here they didn't have that planning, and thus we get to see how rickety their memories are. But anyways, in terms of this threat, it's wild to me that this man says he's joking. And we often hear things like that when people are trying to shield any kind of accountability for their behavior. Oh, it's just a joke. I can't believe you guys can't take a joke. No, it's a threat on the life of a mayor. And we've just seen this recently with the threats to kill Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah.
It's these attacks, and unfortunately, they often do come toward women. But the fact that you are a part of law enforcement It's just he should be held accountable fully. And also, since the fact that he's already qualified for retirement, maybe it's time to go.
Yeah, maybe. Now, as we've been saying, he does claim that it was a joke. The police report says that he backtracked and told the sergeant his comments were a joke after the meeting. Quote, "I don't know why they make a big deal about it. It was just a joke." It's now being looked into. We don't know what's going to end up happening. We don't know yet about any sort of like prosecution or anything like that. But understand that there is the context that while he was saying that, city council members and advocates have been talking about increased transparency and accountability from the Phoenix Police Department because of recent police shootings and police misconduct. What's interesting is that while Gallego, the mayor, has been supportive of creating a civilian oversight office to review police shootings and excessive force claims, she has not supported cutting the police department's budget. In fact, she and the city council has voted to increase the police department's budget in June and last year when she became mayor. But still, like, no matter how much support you show of the police, the idea that it could ever be lowered, that budget, even if it was just to the level of a year ago, is enough for some cops to, at the very least, joke about, if not mean, that they want to take you out.
Oh, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that a story just came out recently about a 33-year-old former NFL player who was murdered by Phoenix police, and the body cam footage just came out, where the gentleman was holding what turned out to be a BB gun. But the thing is that Arizona law allows you to carry a firearm. And so the fact that this person was not responding to your commands means you should just shoot him. What if he was deaf? All of these things that come out that involve police misconduct of some sorts, and the fact that the police are responding this way behind closed doors about essentially threats to kill the mayor, a public official, when they are threatened with the possibility of being subject to accountability and oversight, and maybe their budgets being actually checked, which they need to since they've run amok. The fact that they respond with violence is very disconcerting. Disgusting.
Yeah, and how are you supposed to feel if you're a politician in that area? Like, whether you think the cops are actually going to try to assassinate you, you know that there are people who want to. There's movements across the country to, kidnap governors and stuff like that. And now you have to wonder if the police are actually going to take it seriously when they at least jokingly share the same philosophy.
Exactly. Yep. Because you can't tell me that they're going to pursue some other comment or statement or terroristic threat from another person when they're out here doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Like, get out of here with that mask. All that tells me is that she's unsafe.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that way. She's just doing her job.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, hypothetically, if someone was to joke about killing a cop as a joke, would the cops think it was funny?
Yeah.
Would they think that you were just joking? Why are you making a big deal?
Yeah.
I kind of have a feeling they take it kind of seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me read just a couple more comments, and we're going to do our last quick story. Let's see. John Campbell Rees sent in a super chat saying, "Is it wrong that you have to declare your party preference when you register to vote? What is the point of having a secret ballot?" Well, to some extent, that has to do with access to party primaries, because in a lot of states, but not all states, primaries are closed off to people who are not registered with that party. I get what you're saying. It's still hypothetically a secret ballot, but yeah, that's an interesting thing. I understand what you're saying there. Iron Dragon says, "How do you check the list on Discord? I can't figure it out." Well, if you go to the Twitch chat, there's very helpful people that can help you out, but I can say that it is available, I believe, in the nerds section of the Discord. It should be posted there. But if you aren't able to find it there, I would ask in the Twitch chat at twitch.tv/TYT. And if you head over there, you'll not only get an answer to your question about the spreadsheet, but also you'll be available for Deep Dive with Jordan Ewell and guest Abelina Sabrina, who's going to be joining Jordan in about 30 minutes, actually. Let's see. Matt Miro sent in a super chat saying, "John, love your show, and my bearded dragon, Mjolnir, always runs to the laptop when she hears your voice. Keep up the great work. I'm very popular with lizards. Less so humans or other mammals." Bernie the Kiwi Bird says, "Hi, Long Baba." That's Cantonese for Dragon Daddy. Oh, my God. "Hi,
Yes.
Adrienne. I'm in the mood for Kentucky Fried Turtle. Are you? I know McGrath was completely useless, but why keep voting him back in?" Yeah, how did he get reelected? He had like an 18% approval rating.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this is a democracy. This is what democracy looks like. Tina says, subject change. How interested are you in the Game of Thrones prequels, House of the Dragon, the Dance of Dragons adaptation? Adrienne, any interest in Game of Thrones prequels?
You know what? After that whole Game of Thrones ending and how terrible the last 2 seasons were, I just don't want to talk about it. I want to pretend it doesn't exist, especially if we're going to not have. I have issues with that because the writing team was great, and then they got rid of all the women, and it just went to hell.
I didn't hate the last seasons as much as most people, but there were issues. That does worry me for the prequels, although I believe that the prequels are basically entirely different teams, but we'll see. Anyway, it ain't coming soon, so we can return to this topic in like 2 or 3 years and see what's happening there.
So true.
Okay, let's see. Injustifiable says, my parents own. Thank God the mortgages put the postponed payments on the back end. Our tenants have been able to pay, though, thank God, and they've been paying as they could. Okay, Shadow Wolf says, I work at the post office, and my supervisor told the clerk to continue working after being told the clerk was positive for COVID. How? Like, is there any way in which we as a people actually came together during this challenge? We finally had a challenge where we could all actually take part. Like, it's not just, go serve overseas or like, even back when it's like buy war. Like, we had a chance where we could all in our individual lives take part in meeting this challenge. And we're a bunch of failures. Just a bunch of failures. We love
work, capitalism. We really love to make sure we are all going to continue to be cogs in the machine. Yeah. And we don't know how to function without it.
Exactly. Finally, StrayX sent in a super chat saying, have you watched Wonder Woman 84, John? I got to say, it's not good in a lot of ways. I did watch it with my wife. I thought that she was really good. I thought that Kristen Wiig was really good. And I liked Pedro Pascal. I had some issues with it, but it shot very beautifully. And I thought that they were good. Adrienne, did you see the most recent Wonder Woman?
I didn't see it. It'll probably take me 6 months. So, meh.
Okay. Okay, now with that, why don't we jump into our last story? If you pay a lot of attention to American polling outfits, the semi-reputable ones, and perhaps have known for a long time, that there's pretty much Rasmussen and then everything else. Fundamentally different in a few ways. Their polls always show higher numbers for Republicans, and especially Donald Trump, than any of the others, which is why if Donald Trump is citing a poll, and I don't mean like saying I have 96% approval rating, he's going to be talking about Rasmussen. Now, let's pause for 1 second. We're going to reset in a sec. Adrienne, do you need to go?
I do.
Okay. Well, Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. The audience was really excited to see you. As always, thank you. And everyone, definitely look forward to Adrienne's work. Adrienne, where can they go to see your videos?
So you can catch TYT Overruled on TYT Rebel HQ, which is on Facebook as well as YouTube. And you can catch me on Twitter at Adrienne Law.
Awesome. Thank you again. Have a good one.
You.
Okay. So Rasmussen is always going to be a little bit more positive for Republicans. But that said, it still generally is treated as a serious pollster. You'll see it added to different models for elections and things like that. I wonder if we might be moving past that phase, though, because Rasmussen recently had a Twitter thread about what Mike Pence should do during the certification of the Electoral College votes that I would describe as absolutely insane. So they had this to say, come January 6th, and then they have a quote that is apparently, it's not necessarily actually something that Stalin said, but it's believed to be something that Joseph Stalin said. And they even cite it as being from Stalin. They say, those who cast the votes decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything. And they're putting that in that tweet in an approving fashion, saying, come January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence will be presented with the sealed certificates containing the ballots of the presidential electors. They go on. At that moment, the presidency will be in his hands, and there is nothing stopping Pence, under the plenary and unappealable authority vested in him as president of the Senate, from declining to open and count the certificates from the 6 disputed states. That is totally wrong, and we'll return to that, but I'm going to go on with the thread first. If they are, as more than 70% of Republicans believe, certificates from non-electors appointed via voter fraud, why should he open and count them? If the votes of all 7 contested states are registered as 0, President Trump will have 232 votes. Joe Biden will have 222. And so bada bing, bada boom, hey, Trump wins. But they finally say, per the 12th Amendment, the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greater number of votes for president shall be the president. Reader comments? Which is a great little handoff. Like, hey, you fill in the blank. We've said a thing. We haven't really proven anything. But hey, do you got any thoughts about this? Because we have a theory for how Democratic elections could be over in America. And Mike Pence could just choose to give it to Trump, even though the American people rejected him. Now, there are some constitutional issues with that, which we'll turn to in just a second. But look at their argument as to why he should do it. It's because a lot of Republican voters think that there was voter fraud. Okay. Why do a lot of Republican voters think that there's voter fraud? Is it potentially because Republican politicians have been telling them that? Republican media have been telling them that? Even pollsters like Rasmussen are advancing conspiracy theories. Yes, some Republican voters are going to have been misinformed. They're going to come to the wrong conclusion when everyone they trust has been lying to them for something like 2 months now at this point. And it doesn't matter if 99% of the voters thought that there was voter fraud. That doesn't mean that there was voter fraud. There have been 60 court cases too. How has that gone for Donald Trump, Rasmussen? Not well? They haven't actually been able to prove anything? If it's so abundantly clear that this thing has been fraudulent, why can't any of these Republican-appointed judges accept the voter fraud? Isn't that weird? Why is the Republican-run Department of Justice not interested? They say that they can't find any evidence of fraud or voter fraud. No, don't listen to that. Don't pay any attention to that. Just pay attention to some poll of whether regular Republican voters who would believe anything Trump tells them believe that there was voter fraud. And then finally, on what actually Pence can do, Mike Pence as the VP is going to play a ceremonial role in certifying the vote. The Constitution says that he shall open the envelopes, and they mean that quite literally. He is going to physically open envelopes like it's the Oscars up in here, and he shall do it. Constitution's not interested in him maybe doing it, or if he gets around to it doing it. It says that he shall do it. It's an order. It's not a branching choose your own democratic adventure. He's just supposed to open the envelopes. And it doesn't say anything about just choosing which ones he wants to, and if he doesn't, they don't actually count. This is a pathetic, unconstitutional argument that they are literally defending via a Stalin quote. Now, it's not just me that doesn't think that there's anything here. Legal experts say that Pence has no power to actually do what they describe, and that Rasmussen's strategy is based on a misunderstanding of the law. Pence has the right to call on states to submit their electoral votes if they haven't done so by late December, according to the Washington Post, but he doesn't have the power to reject any of the votes. And if even in theory he decided that he's not going to fulfill his purely ceremonial part in this process, which many vice presidents have had to do, where they will open these votes that certify the result for the opposing party. That's a thing that even Joe Biden himself has had to do historically. What would end up happening is that he could maybe, arguably, pause the process until his term expires on January 20th, because simply not counting the votes doesn't lead to Trump winning and him carrying on as VP. It just means that we would then pause, I guess. And on the 20th, he would no longer be the VP. Nancy Pelosi would take over as acting president. Chuck Grassley would take over presiding over the joint session, and the counting would then continue. Now, is Pence going to do this? I don't believe so. I hope not. It would only be a purposeful delaying and amplification of their failure, because they have really dragged it out. Every day they look sadder and sadder and sadder. Now, does that mean that they're not going to follow this path? No. Trump seems to be a glutton for humiliation and his own punishment, but it would not actually result in Donald Trump becoming president. But more importantly, especially because there's no chance of this happening, let's be very clear about what is happening here. An outlet that has tried to pitch themselves as a serious pollster is advocating in a Twitter thread for the end of democracy in America. Now, I have no control over what CNN or MSNBC or Fox News does in the future. If they want to continue using Rasmussen's already questionable polls, historically questionable polls, I can't stop them from doing that. But I really hope that this is an opportunity for America to understand what Rasmussen actually is, what they're actually advocating for. Quinnipiac isn't calling for the end of direct election of senators. PPP isn't saying that like everything should be done by ballot initiative. They do polls. They hopefully, if they do their job well, reveal a bit of truth about what the American people think. They don't try to turn the American people against the Constitution or against democracy. This is madness. And I understand that considering all that's going on with the pandemic and the economic problems, the debate over COVID aid and all of that, this is the sort of story that could fall like through the cracks. But I don't think it should. This says so much about Rasmussen, and with the amount of faith that the right has in Rasmussen, it says a lot about them too. So don't forget it. Anyway, with that, that is the end of our show for today. Thank you to everybody who joined us for the show, for the pre-show, who joined us for Adrienne. Very thankful to have you here. Thank you to everybody, by the way, also who has signed on for our new YouTube membership, only in its third week. And for those of you at the second and third tier, we now have 2 top 10 lists that you can view, the top 10 garbage people of the year of 2020, as well as just this Monday with Francesca Fiorentini, I recorded the top 10 Trump goofs that we're going to look back on his presidency for. More will be coming, so if you become a member, you'll be able to watch all of those. With that, everyone, stick around for Deep Dive on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube, you can transfer over to twitch.tv/TYT. Jordan Ewell is going to be taking a fun look at the news. He's going to be joined by Abelina Sabrina as well, who is recently the co-host of TDR. And so that's going to be coming in just 19 minutes. So definitely stay tuned for that. Until the next time, stay safe out there. Stay sane out there. I'll see you soon.